See me?
You look great. You look
There
great.
you go. Okay. Thank you, Dean Velakis and Dr. Christie. Thank you to the FIU's IT department and everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this virtual graduation a success. Welcome, esteemed members of the faculty, proud parents, family members, and friends of the inductees, and congratulations to FIU's CEC graduating class of 2020. It is an honor to be here today as an FIU Electrical Engineering alumnus of '08 and an FIU's Master's in Business Administration alumnus 2011. When I got the invitation 2 weeks ago to be this year's keynote speaker, I decided to prepare with the same intensity many of you have devoted to your senior project. So late last night, I began. I remember my engineering graduation 12 years ago, and it was nothing like this. Not only are we facing a global pandemic, but we are in the middle of the worst unemployment crisis the United States has ever seen. Every person of every age and walk of life has been affected by COVID-19. During times like these, I am reminded of the first half of a quote by Michael Hoff. Hard times create strong men create good times. If it is true that these are hard times, then it must also be true that you will come out stronger than ever before. Because if history has taught us anything, is that all individuals are capable of greatness in the face of adversity. Having said this, it is especially important that we listen to and pay attention to the entire quote, as the second half of it is the part we need to watch out for. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. This is a cycle that, according to writer Stefan Arnio, happens worldwide and in a great scale every 80 years. Personally, I have found that this cycle also happens in a smaller scale to everyone all throughout their lifetime. And while I strongly believe that the lessons learned during hard times are the ones that will forever define you, I also believe that there are ways of getting over the hard times faster and avoid becoming too weak for too long. So with this in mind, I'd like to share with you some tips I learned along the way. When I first moved to Miami from Venezuela, I started both FIU and my first job. I started out as an intern, making $10 an hour, helping out in the different departments as needed without having a real job or fixed to-do list. Shortly after, I was assigned a permanent role as a purchasing agent under the direction of my dad. Yes, my dad was my first boss, and no, it was not his business. We simply worked together at the same real estate development company. One of the first things I learned to say was yes. Employees need to say yes to everything, because if you say no too many times, you'll probably end up without a job. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, at plain sight, my job was fairly simple. I would call subcontractors from different trades in order to get prices to later award contracts. Easy, right? Not quite. There were around 30 different trades. For each trade, we needed to have a minimum of 3 bids, which really meant having to call at least 5 companies per trade. For anyone here good in math, that was 150 calls just to ask if they wanted to bid, then 150 emails with plans attached, followed by 150 calls to confirm they received my email, 150 calls to go over the proposals while trying to understand what they were pricing, putting together a spreadsheet, sitting down with my boss and the owner of the company to present my findings, calling the best subs in each trade to schedule meeting, hosting the meetings, negotiating price, and finally awarding contracts. Like I said, easy and not at all time consuming. At first, I felt the other people in my department knew so much about construction, and for a while, I was learning a lot from them. As I read the scopes, I began to ask questions about them. Some were answered by my coworkers, most were not. It was clear that they did not know everything there was to know about what they were doing, nor were they interested in learning. I decided to ask my father, who was not only my boss, but had been in the construction industry all his life. He explained that this type of work is typically done by estimators who study construction and know everything there was to know about the specific trades they were assigned to. He also said that unfortunately where we work, they don't pay much. So the purchasing agents didn't even want to learn more in fear of attaining more responsibility with the same pay. He further said, and I quote, "If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys." But what's so wrong with monkeys if they get the job done? Turns out that back in the 1930s, there was a famous scientist named Winthrop Kellogg. He and his wife tried to raise a 7.5-month-old chimpanzee named Gua along their son Donald, who was 10 months old at the time, like brother and sister. The hypothesis was that by raising a chimpanzee alongside a human, the chimpanzee would behave more like a human, and compared to other chimpanzees, this one would excel in every category. For the next few months, both would be raised and tested the same, and for a while, Gua excelled at tests compared to Donald. When Donald turned 16 months, however, he was capable of speaking, but Gua, who was little over a year old, could not. Not only because she was younger than Donald, but because she was in fact a chimpanzee. So in March 1932, the Kellogg's ended the experiment, not because they couldn't keep raising and testing both at the same level, but because something unexpected happened, something the Kellogg's did not anticipate. Donald, their son, started copying Gua's sounds and mimicking chimpanzees' behavior. With this in mind, the first tip is stay away from people without goals and surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. When you surround yourself with people without goals or ambitions, you are going to end up without goals or ambitions. This is where the saying, tell me who you hang out with and I'll tell you who you are, and your network is your net worth come from. So I ask again, what is wrong with a monkey if it gets the job done? Nothing, so long as you're not spending too much time with them. Otherwise, you will inevitably become one of them. This realization is what propelled me to pursue something better. On a professional level, I became a property manager, single-handedly ran the entire property management department of the same real estate development company. In this new capacity, I oversaw 15 HOA and condo associations, as well as over 300 rental units. At the time, I had recently graduated from engineering, so from an education perspective, I enrolled at FIU's Executive MBA, as I was convinced that by being an engineer and having a better understanding about business would be a killer combination in any industry. I was working full-time 9 to 5 and attending graduate school from 6 to 10. Needless to say, it was a challenge, but one that I knew I could handle. Not because I had done it before, but because of everything I have learned along the way. As long as I keep moving forward, everything is possible. And after 18 short months, I was back at FIU for my second graduation. I remember listening to the keynote speaker as he was talking about his experience in the workplace and how, through no fault of his own, he was faced with the option of working at and potentially taking over his father's business. The name of the business was Lopez Roofing. So the father suggested adding and son to the business name, Lopez Roofing and Son. Something many people do when their kid joins the family business. But he said, no, Dad, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to add and father to the name. If you want me to take over the business, the new name will be Lopez Roofing and Father. I remember thinking to myself, who in their right mind would make such an outrageous request to his father? And what kind of father would even consider it? Didn't make sense to me at that point. But it did, however, motivate me to be brave and ask for something I have been wanting to ask for a long time, but didn't have the courage to do. So after graduation, I walked up to the owner of the real estate development company, and I used my new degree to try to advance within the company. I presented myself as an asset, a fancy word I learned at the MBA, which is short for someone who is worth more to the company than just another employee. As part of my presentation, I even handed him an updated resume with the MBA listed under my education and his name and number under references. He liked my speech. He agreed with everything I said. He went so far as to share with me the details of an opportunity within the company, a position in the same capacity as a CFO that would be perfect for me based on my work experience and my education. I was pumped. 2 weeks later, they hired someone to fill that position, started her off with a base salary twice as much as mine. And just like that, I was back to being just another employee. That day, I learned that I had reached to the top of my old place of business. Not because I personally wasn't capable of going higher, but because my employer put up a ceiling and there was no way I was going to break it. I had two options: stay in my current job waiting for another opportunity to come along, or seek a change that I was so desperately craving. Don't get me wrong. There's something attractive, something familiar, something safe about staying in my old position where I was comfortable. But by this time, I was already married and my wife was pregnant. I didn't know if I could afford to stay comfortable for much longer, or if I should wander into the unknown and seek to be uncomfortable. So, for my second tip, never let yourself get complacent. Always seek to be uncomfortable. As Benjamin Mays put it, the tragedy of life is often not in our failure, but rather in our complacency, not in our doing too much, but rather in doing too little, not in our living above our ability, but rather in living below our capacities. This is when I started looking for something else, something new, something where my talents and my knowledge would come in play. It's funny how you don't realize the things around you until you start looking for them. All I have to say is yellow cars. And next time you drive around Miami, you'll notice how many yellow cars there are. This is exactly what happened to me when I started looking for opportunities outside of my workplace. They were everywhere, all around me, some better than others, but none as great as this one. Through my work as a purchasing agent, I met many successful people along the way. Remember those 150 calls? One of them was to Inocencio Gonzalez, or Ino for short. He was the president of an air conditioning company. My father and Ino had become good friends just from negotiating contracts and working on projects together. One day, while the two of them were talking, Ino shared with my dad some of the problems his company was facing. He was convinced that the problem was so big that his only solution was to sell the business. My dad saw an opportunity in the making for me and proposed a simple solution. Ino and I began to talk, and within 1 week, I became the newest partner and vice president of A&P Air Conditioning. Right away, two emotions hit me. One, excitement. I had been looking for something new, something better for a long time, and it had finally arrived. And two, fear. How am I going to do this? I barely know anything about air conditioning. I've never been the boss before. What if I fail? How am I going to make this work? My third and final tip is whenever a once in a lifetime opportunity presents itself and you don't know if you can handle it, always say yes first and then figure out how to do it. I didn't let fear get in the way or ruin this great opportunity. I jumped right in without a parachute, knowing that I would learn to fly in the process. I immediately gave notice at the office. I gave them the typical, 7 weeks. Yes, I offered 7 weeks, as I knew it would take him a long time to find a replacement. And I also did not want there to be any hard feelings between my old company and the new one. After all, A&P was and still is working with its real estate developer. I remember, called me one day and said, "You and I are going to be working together soon. Are you ready for this?" With my employee mentality, I was about to say yes, but it didn't feel right as I'm not an employee anymore and Eno's not my boss. It was not what a new business partner would say. Also, out of nowhere, I remembered what I heard at the MBA graduation about Lopez Roofing, and it hit me. The real reason why the son made such an outrageous request was his way of answering his partner's first question without an employee mentality, without having to say yes. It was his opportunity to prove to his father that he was ready to lead. So with that in mind, and as scared as I was to break free from my old ways, I closed my eyes and said, the question is, are you ready for me? I know, not as bold or outrageous as Mr. Lopez Jr., but for starters, was not a simple yes. Second, by not saying yes, I showed him that I'm not here to do what he says, that I'm here to work with him side by side to grow our business. Third, and most importantly, by asking, "Are you ready for me?" I tried to establish dominance by getting him to say his first yes to me, but he was too smart to fall for my trick. Instead, he laughed and said, "I think we're going to do great things together." And that is exactly what we've been doing for the last 6 years. Hasn't always been easy. Mistakes have been made, but we learned from our mistakes and moved on. Class of 2020, you chose the hard path of an engineer. You are now responsible for creating and shaping the future. Some of you will write the code, others will design it, while the rest of you will build it. It will not always be easy. Mistakes will be made, but you too will learn from them and move on. So before these hard times are over, remember that if the people in your circle only talk about video games, gossip, weekend plans, or even worse, they advise you to slow down or take it easy. Seek a new circle of people who instead talk about the stock market, investments, new business ideas, and not only approve of, but support your hustle. Don't let yourself become a monkey. Surround yourself with like-minded individuals. Look at your screen. Here are close to 300 ambitious and intelligent peers, most of which you have had the honor of taking classes with. Reach out to people who are smarter than you and 5 ways to learn from them. Again, look at your screen. FIU's engineering faculty members are some of the brightest minds in Florida. Remember that complacency kills more dreams than failure ever will. Set goals so big that they keep you up at night trying to achieve them. Never settle for mediocrity. As Grant Cardone would say, taking massive action means making somewhat unreasonable choices and then following these up with even more action. This level of action will be considered by some to be borderline insane, well beyond the agreed upon social norm, and will always create new problems. But keep in mind, if you don't create new problems, then you're not taking enough action. Remember that some opportunities only come once in a lifetime, and if you hesitate to say yes, they can slip away and never return. Always say yes first. Do not let them go. The how will come later. Continue to learn new things inside and outside of school. FIU has amazing graduate programs. Learn a new skill. Nowadays, there are books for every topic you may be interested in. If you lack the time to read, do what I do. Listen to the book in your car while you commute to work. Subscribe to podcasts and stay current on world and local news. And last but not least, remember to help those in need and to give back when you are able to. Think about who was and continues to be there for you, who helped and continues to help you along the way, and think how you can do the same for others. I'm proud to announce that last year we founded the AMP First Generation Scholarship for Future Engineers Endowment. This scholarship, which was created in perpetuity, will help others achieve the dreams of becoming engineers, a dream that today all of you have made into a reality. So without further ado, let me be the first to say, congratulations, CEC class of 2020. You are now all engineers. Welcome to the club.
Well,